Give me studies about all of these claims. You're just making them without.
I will post them after. I will post them after this conversation. This is Introduction to Psychology. I'm studying psychology.
A child is different from a rapist. Right?
I gave the example of an adult.
Different from disciplining a rapist. Like,
it doesn't work.
You're saying that even punishment is something that we should abolish, and you have no solution. Like, I don't know what that means. Like, how do we?
I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying
if there's no negative reinforcement.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that harsh positive punishment doesn't work. It does the opposite of working, which is why.
That's a basic liberal theory. It's like 300.
It is not liberal theory. It is basic psychological science. And I will.
This is what the Enlightenment thinkers argued. The Enlightenment thinkers argued. Someone like John Stuart Mill argued that corporal punishment is barbaric and punishment as a whole is irrational because it contravenes utilitarianism. If you punish someone, the crime that has been committed is not going to, reverse itself. The harm from the crime has already been committed. So if you impose more harm through a punishment, that increases the overall harm in society. So that's irrational. This is a utilitarian argument. And the Enlightenment thinkers are the ones who argued it exactly in the same way that you're arguing it, but it was based on their philosophy, not actual empirical science. Now that we do have empirical science, we can look at the rehabilitation rate, the crime rate, and the prison system in the West is a complete failure. Okay, isn't this what's being protested right now with abolish the police? This is exactly what all of society is being turned over because
excessive force is being protested.
This institution of policing and jailing people that many have found barbaric and completely contrary to human happiness.
That makes my point, not your point, because people are protesting excessive force right now.
No, they're protesting more than that. They're protesting abolish the police, abolish the prison system.
Because of excessive force.
I mean, all of history.
No, because they're protesting excessive force. What is the main problem that they're protesting?
How much better society would be, as Peter Moskos argues with evidence in his book, published peer-reviewed book, In Defense of Flogging, how much better society would be if we returned to the standard of corporal punishment.
Daniel, I want to ask you a question. You brought it up. I'm sorry, you brought it up.
We haven't finished that.
No. If a person in an Islamic society is caught selling heavy drugs, what should happen to that person under an Islamic society?
Heavy drugs?
Let's give an example: cocaine or marijuana, for example. Marijuana is not heavy, but what happens to that person if a person is caught selling marijuana to people?
I mean, I have to review. Like, I can't speak authoritatively. For drunkenness, shorb al-khamr, drinking wine, there is lashing. So the sale of wine or intoxicants, I have to review exactly what the procedure is for that.
Fair enough. But let's talk about drinking, for example. Drinking is punished with lashing, right?
Yep.
Yet you are saying that people are protesting the system in America. And essentially, this is known. People are protesting excessive force in America because the police is on the spot treating people disproportionately right now, black people, as the protesters argue, with excessive force. And they want the police to stop using excessive force because they consider that an evil. That is what people are protesting. Yet you are bringing that up as how the system doesn't work and people are protesting against it, while you are arguing that people should be punished with flogging if they drink alcohol. How do you justify that?
That's a separate point. How do I justify the punishment of drinking alcohol? Intoxicants are something that destroys individual human life. It destroys families. This is something in my own family, extended family, people who are addicted to all kinds of drugs. Britain flooded Iran with opium, causing massive addiction. This is how they destroyed many societies. China is another example with the opium wars. So addiction is a massive evil that causes all kinds of destruction. If you can deter that, as the West does, I think that deterrence is important. And then also education and health, helping people with addiction. I think these are all things that can take away this blight of drug addiction and substance abuse. And yeah, flogging, again, being
But
flogged,
haven't you just argued that people are
much more humane, flogging someone who has public intoxication, flogging them and sending them on their way, or putting them in prison for 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years, 3 strikes, and you're out, kind of legal punishment that exists in the West. I prefer flogging. I think flogging is much more humane and effective.
But haven't you just argued that the Western system is a failure because people are protesting it, and that's a sign of it?
It is a failure, yeah.
But people are protesting excessive force.
How's that? I'm not advocating a prison system. Flogging is completely different.
People are protesting excessive force in the West.
Yeah,
That's what people are protesting. In America, people are currently protesting excessive force by authorities, the police. The Islamic equivalent of that would be authorities that enforce excessive force by flogging people who merely drink alcohol. In the West, we are, for example, talking about black people who sell drugs and are then being mistreated by police officers. You're bringing up the protests of Western people of the system as an evidence that the system is a failure, yet you are advocating excessive force in an Islamic society against people for something as basic as alcohol.
Ridwan.
That's what you said. That's not what I'm saying.
Follow the argument, please. Okay, the failure is not because it's a punishment from authorities. That's not what the failure is.
What is
the failure is all of the systematic racism. The failure comes from the police state, the surveillance state.
But you are arguing that there should be surveillance.
The prison industrial complex, from capitalism, from a corporate nation state bureaucracy, technocratic state.
How is it a failure?
Ridwan, those are the failures that
how it is a failure. How is it a failure?
Are not found in Islam.
How is it a failure? What is a failure about it?
How is systematic racism a failure? Is that the question?
Systematic racism is completely beside the point. You're talking about that has nothing to do with the topic. You're talking about
that has nothing to do with prisons.
That has nothing to do with our conversation. Of course, racism is argued to be.
You're the one who's telling me about protests.
You talked about protests.
I bring it up to show that this is. I'm not against punishment.
No, you brought this up because you argued that the system of the punishment system is an issue. This has nothing to do with the race issue. You brought up that the Western system of punishing society is a failure. Yet, what exactly is a failure about it? And how is racism relevant to this discussion?
Racism is part of the failure. The prison industrial complex.
It has nothing to do with the topic, though. Racism is a problem, but it has nothing to do with the prison system.
Why is the failure? I give you a reason why it's a failure, and you say it has nothing to do with the topic.
It has. Okay.
I don't know how.
You're saying
different language here.
You're saying the prison and punishment system in America is a failure, and people are protesting it.
Yeah.
And then you are arguing for the alternative of an Islamic punishment system.
Yeah.
But then you bring up racism as reason of the failure. How is racism relevant to comparing the Islamic punishment system to the American punishment system or the liberal punishment system?
It's one and doesn't exist in the other. That's why it's relevant.
It has no. It could also exist in the Islamic system. You just this is it is.
Why? I mean, this is your just.
Daniel, racism is not part of liberalism. It is contrary to liberalism.
Oh, I disagree. Look at all of the liberal thinkers: John Stuart Mill, Immanuel Kant, Hume. Look at David Hume. Look at Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. They were all white supremacists. That's why their statues are being toppled right now. They were all white supremacists who believe in the superiority of the white race. Liberalism. Look, right here. Maybe you can't see it.
I don't understand why we're talking about racism, considering that Islam has a religious supremacist system.
Comparing Islam with liberalism, you brought it up.
No, you're shifting from the point. We talked about
liberalism, a counter history. This Italian philosopher writes about the deeply racist history of liberalism.
Racism is completely irrelevant to the point. We were talking about the methods
of liberalism.
We were talking about the methods of punishment and comparing the methods of punishment to the Islamic methods of punishment. Racism has nothing to do with this at all. You got into a point where you're trying to wiggle yourself out right now by bringing up racism. Racism has nothing to do with the point. We're talking about why the Western punishment system is wrong, because that was the entire discussion about. The punishment methods are wrong, and why the Islamic punishment methods are right. Fine.
You understand that something can be wrong for multiple reasons, right?
Why is it wrong?
First, do you accept that something can be wrong for multiple reasons?
Of course I do. Of course I do, but racism has nothing to do with the methods here.
Racism has nothing to do with the prison system.
Nothing with the methods.
Okay, fine. Then forget racism. The prison system, the prison industrial complex. No. Do you think that my argument is that I'm against jails? I'm against locking people up in principle? No, because that's actually Islamic. With Islamic judges historically. They also implemented prison punishment. So okay, that's my argument.
To be very fair, I think we have completely drifted into a thing that has completely deviated from our actual discussion, which is why we're getting into this spot that we cannot get out of, because we're talking about how the prison system is preferable to the flogging system, how the flogging system is preferable to the prison system, and all that. Let's get out of it. I agree. We won't get anywhere with this. I think we should come to the main point, because we are far above our time actually, and we have still not discussed why you would think or how we could argue that your definition of a just society is that a society should be should find fulfillment, should be collectively happy, and we can only make it collectively fulfilled and collectively happy by enforcing the laws of the Islamic Sharia, for example, by executing homosexuals, executing apostates, executing adulterers, and all that stuff. Why do you think this is what should be required from a society? I want to ask you two questions. If you were not a Muslim, if you did not believe that Allah created humanity and the world, that Allah did not create you, that Allah did not put out the laws for us, would you still believe that the system that Islam presents is the perfect system to have? And this, my second question is, why do you think this matters? Why do you think human happiness and human fulfillment eventually matters to Allah?
So let me answer the first question. And do I think that if I were a non-Muslim, would this seem like the perfect system? And my answer is yes. I'm providing all of these reasons in this argumentation, and I invite all the viewers to look at the citations that I provide, research the points that I'm making about family, kinship, bottom-up versus top-down society, and see for yourself, and you'll come to the conclusion that objectively there's one religion that matches these kinds of instincts and this kind of empirical research, and that religion is Islam. That's the entire argument that I'm making. I'm appealing to a non-Muslim audience, but you really need to let me finish justifying some of these points, because we haven't even talked about apostasy. You set me up by asking the question, and I gave you just a straight answer, like, is this punishable by death and so forth? But you didn't give me a chance to fully justify and finish the argument. Okay. We got into side issues, but let me just finish the argument with homosexuality as well. So homosexuality also contravenes stable families. It's something that frustrates stable families, and this is for a lot of reasons. Evolutionarily also a kind of disgust reaction to homosexual behavior is universal. It's actually instinctual. And this is something that I ask those who believe in evolution, explain why such a feeling of disgust would evolve within humans, disgust for male on male sexual behavior. And to justify this argument, look at the paper, The Association Between Disgust, Sensitivity, and Negative Attitudes Towards Homosexuality. Also, I have
a very simple answer to that.
Also look at Gordon Gallup, who wrote, or that study is by Gordon Gallup. And then I have some other studies that I can cite for you as well. But Gordon Gallup argues that this disgust reaction is universal. It's found across all societies. There's a Chinese study that also makes the same point. But this kind of attitude, he argues, of disgust is towards homosexuality is universal, and it's not xenophobia. Because you might say that, well, people are disgusted by it because they're xenophobic. And Gordon Gallup, this sociologist at the University of Albany, who published his papers on 4 separate studies that he did, showed that no, it's not because of xenophobia. He distinguishes this disgust to homosexual behavior is its own separate reaction. It's not just xenophobia or fear of the other. But why? What is the evolutionary basis for that? Gordon Gallup makes a very clear argument. He says that when we look at homosexual behavior, where does homosexuality come from? There is a high correlation between becoming homosexual in orientation and early childhood sexual experience. So when a boy at a young age comes into sexual contact with a male adult, that seems to be highly correlated with having a homosexual orientation later in life. So basically, child molestation and homosexuality, there is a very strong correlation between them, and there's a lot of studies on that as well, such as does physical abuse, sexual abuse, or neglect in childhood increase the likelihood of same-sex sexual relationships and cohabitation, by Helen Wilson, published in 2008. And then there's also comparative data of childhood and adolescence molestation in heterosexual and homosexual persons by Marie Tomio in 2001. So they proved this, peer-reviewed research, that there is a correlation. So imagine that you want to this is Gordon Gallup's explanation. You are a man who wants a large family with children, a stable family, you want grandchildren, and that's your instinct. Instinctually, you have that. And then homosexuals are molesting your children and causing them to be homosexuals because of that behavior. Your genes are not going to spread. So disgust and protecting your children from contact with homosexuals is actually instinctual because it's evolutionarily adaptive.
That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Number one, I want to say it doesn't support the point at all. Number one, no.
Why is it
Daniel, I want to go on as we agreed because I want to.
Why are you interrupting?
Because we agreed at the very beginning of our conversation before we started. You know that very well.
Over me, so you set me up by saying yes, homosexuals should get.
It is ridiculously stupid. It is scientifically agreed.
Don't let me explain fully. You interrupt me in the middle of the argument.
You interrupt me all the time, Daniel. I could just mute you here. I don't do that. You interrupt me all the time. We agreed before our chat that we will have very simple, short questions and short answers. Your questions go into a whole propaganda of what is scientifically.
Peer-reviewed research is propaganda?
I will mute you for a second. I'm sorry. You are presenting a study. I have muted you, yes. Just for a second to say something. You are citing a study. I have just Googled homosexuality natural. The only study that I find is the study that you cited. That is number one. Number two is that it has been scientifically concluded that homophobia is not a natural thing. If you just want to argue that because I have unmuted you, you can speak again. If you just argue that because humans somehow have a natural disgust against homophobia, that somehow this means people will infect others with homosexual behavior, and homosexual behavior will spread, and we should crack down on people for the safety of society. This is simply inconclusive. This is wrong. This is not based on scientific understandings of homosexuality, and the argument for this is very simple. The argument for this is that according to the APA and many other institutions that lead the world in scientific progress, in psychological progress, the basic psychology that we learn from everywhere, because they are based on research papers that are actually cited hundreds of times, whereas this paper that I'm looking at, that you cited, was cited 6 times, which means this is ridiculous in a scientific consensus. I'm telling you this. In the scientific world, in the scientific world, a paper that has been cited 6 times is ridiculous. You cannot give this as a universal point as a universal evidence to make your point. The one that you cited about Gordon Gallup, for example. In the American Psychologists Association knows, as any other scientific institution that is leading the world in progress, in scientific progress right now, that homosexuality is something that naturally occurs, which is not for or against the point. I'm not saying that at all. I don't even care if homosexuality is natural or not. I don't give a damn about that. I don't give a damn about that, or if homosexuality is natural or not. But you are saying that because people feel some sort of disgust against homosexual behavior, that this is somehow a supporting point of your argument, and the entire discussion is going on through a summary, through a pandering of these supposedly pseudoscientific points. What we see is that homosexual people also feel disgust. Homosexual people also feel disgust against heterosexual behavior. I have many friends. I have many friends who are homosexual who feel disgust at the thought of a man and a woman having sex. This is a ridiculous point to bring up. No. How does this exactly serve your point? It is completely ridiculous.
Okay.
Homosexual people feel disgust by looking at or thinking of a heterosexual intercourse. How exactly does this strengthen your point? I don't want you to go into lengthy presentations I explained
how it supports my point. Let me finish the argument without interrupting.
You're not finishing arguments. You're building a minute long.
You interrupt, and then you might mute me.
You're not going to an argument. I haven't muted.
Step by step.
Daniel, I want simple questions, simple answers. I don't want you to go for 5 minutes to talk about scientific papers.
You don't want the actual full argument. I know, because every time I bring up points, you say this is pseudoscience. You just hand wave. That's the only way that you're arguing. You don't want to confront
Daniel, from the very beginning of our conversation, points
that I'm bringing up without resorting, but this doesn't make sense. Okay, that's your response to it. Doesn't make sense. Okay, make an argument, make counterpoints, but you don't even let me speak.
Daniel, from the very beginning of our
argument. Let me finish the argument. You have universal disgust reactions. Why?
Daniel, from the very beginning of our conversation, I have agreed from the very beginning to you that this is not meant to be a debate. This is meant to be a conversation.
I'm just trying to make my point. If it's not a debate, why are you not interrupting?
You cannot even let me make a fucking disclaimer for 1 second. Are you kidding me? I thought I was too emotional and too impatient for a discussion. I seriously thought that before we had this discussion. From the very beginning of this conversation, you have numerous times talked for 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and I haven't interrupted you. Whenever I begin to talk, you are throwing in so many things. It is ridiculous. We're not getting anywhere because I cannot put a single thought out there without you interrupting me, and I have to listen to you talk for 7, 8 minutes.
You want to put a timer? You want to put a timer? We put a timer. 5 minute allocation.
We can leave that to a debate. It was very clear.
Before I can make them, you interrupt my arguments before I can complete them. Let me finish the argument.
Daniel, this is the 20th time that you're finishing an argument. And whenever I say something, when you are done and I begin talking, there you are interrupting. This has turned into a circus. This is ridiculous. This is not a conversation. I am here trying to have a conversation with you, not have minute-long discussions from your side, and then a 50-second or a 15-second talk from my side, where after you interrupt again and bring up all your 5-minute points. This is not how this conversation is supposed to work. It doesn't work. This is not productive. This is not ideal. This is not mature. This doesn't go anywhere. It just doesn't work. You're telling me I'm not letting you speak. You haven't let me speak for.
Are you finished grandstanding? Are you like a really? Are you a victim here?
Are you kidding me?
Why?
I am the guy.
Let me finish an argument and then respond. Isn't that what rational discourse is about?
Yes, and you haven't allowed me to do that one single time.
Articulate the argument. I did let you speak. You remember your whole immigrant Muslim rapist rant?
Yes, because I yelled and because I told you, please let me speak, and that was only the first.
I'll let you speak. Let me finish the argument, then I'll let you speak.
I cannot go on with this bullcrap anymore. Let's keep it brief. You are not making a point by bringing up lengthy references to some papers that no one will be able to look up. When we have a consensus that disagrees with you,
I try to bring evidence for my points. Unlike you, I don't just hand wave and say, "Oh, it doesn't make sense." I actually bring evidence and step-by-step argumentation. That's the difference between the way I argue and the way that you rant.
This is not a debate. That's why I told you.
Debate. Do you know what argument means? It doesn't mean a debate.
An argument is not something where you cite
premises and a conclusion. I'm not arguing with you in the sense that I'm having a fight with you.
That's what a debate is.
An argument. Premise one.
That's what a debate is.
Premise three. Conclusion.
That's why I told you days ago that we're not having a debate. We're just having a natural, normal conversation, not a debate. Because a debate is something where you make 20-minute introductions and 20-minute or 5-minute or 10-minute points for and against the argument. That's what you do during a debate, and that's what we're not doing here.
So present an argument, you present a point, and you support it with.
You have no idea how a debate works or how a conversation works. So.
I don't know. Where's your philosophy degree? Where's your credentials in debate and argumentation?
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I haven't studied philosophy. I'm sorry. Who am I to speak?
Jeez. I mean, you don't even know what an argument is.
There's so much arrogance here. It's incredible. You're supposed to logically argue.
When I have a conversation with someone, they allow me to finish my points, to make a complete thought, a complete argument, and then they respond to it. But you keep. Just like Armin and these other ex-Muslims, you don't let me finish the point. Okay? You're complaining about I'm bringing in too much data and evidence. Like, that's a complaint. I thought you were interested.
No, I'm not. That is a ridiculously stupid accusation. I'm not accusing you of bringing in too much data and evidence. That's not what I'm doing. I'm accusing you of bringing up irrelevant evidence that doesn't lead to your point at all. You're bringing up a study, for example.
According to you, you just hand wave. It doesn't lead to my point. How?
Okay, look, this is the one single time.
I'll summarize it for you. I'll summarize very close.
This is the one single time after Daniel Haqiqatjou has done this for 5-6 times. This is the one single time. You're muted, by the way. No one can hear you. This is the one single time that I will actually appeal to the audience and will say, "Dear audience, look at this conversation and decide for yourselves. How often has Daniel Haqiqatjou been allowed to speak, and how often have I spoken for longer than a few seconds?" Dear audience, decide. This is ridiculous.
Okay.
Go ahead. Do what you want.
All right. It's very simple. When you have a bottom-up society.
Forget about it. Go to the point of why you think. Okay. Sure.
Society, stable family structures lead to the maximum amount of happiness, according to Jonathan Haidt, many other sociobiologists and evolutionary biologists. This is why certain things have evolved from an evolutionary perspective, which I don't agree with, but your evolutionary scientists and anthropologists and psychologists agree with this. And certain kinds of behavior is contrary to stable families. Homosexuality is one of them. Adultery, fornication is a major problem, creates a major dysfunction within society. And Islam deters that with punishment because of the high cost that comes to society. Very simple argument that is based in scientific research, anthropological consensus, and this is why things like adultery were condemned in many religions, not just adultery, and not just Islam. Adultery, homosexuality were condemned in many religions and societies, even non-Abrahamic societies. Why? Why do we find this universal pattern? Because it's based on human instincts and it's based on adaptiveness if you want to appeal to an evolutionary argument. So the materialist, utilitarian, liberal has to think, why is this the case? And the argument that, oh, we're just more enlightened now and we understand things better is not a very good argument. So let's move to apostasy.
Okay. Can I have an objection to that briefly?
Go ahead.
A utilitarian point of view is actually that society eventually decides what is better for society, and society comes up with their own laws in order to establish what is best for the individual, and what is best for the individual correlates with what is best for a society. And the utilitarian perspective is that people have over time, over millennia, over centuries, made laws because they found that these certain laws work best for their society. So when people, for example, outlawed crime outlawed homicide all around the world, which is a very universal law, they came to that conclusion that they must outlaw homicide for a society to work, because if you allow homicide, then you will endanger your neighbor. Your neighbor will endanger you, and essentially you will not be able to function. You will not be able to find happiness, to grow as a society. That is the most basic, simple explanation of utilitarianism. If you look at utilitarianism from a modern point of view, from 21st century, you would what you would actually agree, just not to misrepresent utilitarianism, is that since society has now come to agree that we should approach society liberally, and should approach social freedoms liberally, and should allow homosexual people to practice homosexuality and to be homosexual without punishing it with death or castration or anything alike. We have come to that conclusion because we have understood that is better for society. Because by punishing homosexuality with death or with brutal punishments like fornication, for example, we don't get rid of homosexuality, because homosexuality is not something that you get rid of. It exists in Islamic society very greatly. It exists in East Asian societies, in every society all around the world. It has always existed. There were societies which normalized it to extents, for example, the Roman Empire before the conversion to Christianity, and many other reasons. The utilitarian and liberal point of view is that homosexuality must be or should be allowed by people to be practiced, and you cannot punish it with death, because as long as you punish it with death, you only cause it to be a rage in society by homosexuals, which will only endanger the ultimate happiness of society. The ultimate happiness of society can only be ensured by allowing homosexuality, for example, which is not something that spreads, which we have scientifically concluded in the 21st century, but which is rather something that stays among people who are homosexual. That is the actual utilitarian and liberal point of view, just not to misrepresent that. But go on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice story, but it's incoherent. We have understood society decides what is best. How do they decide? Which societies decided that this is the best? Many societies historically decide actually that's not the best. This is destructive behavior. Adultery, fornication is destructive behavior, and that's why they severely deterred it with punishment. In Muslim society and many societies. So I don't know where you have this data. We have understood. You keep using this language. Who's we?
I'm obviously referring to liberal society.
Majority of the world. If you do surveys, and they have done surveys on homosexuality, most people historically, and even in recent times, and even in the West, are uncomfortable with this practice, and they actually oppose rights. These kinds of same-sex marriage rights in the West, included in the West. So I don't know who's deciding these values. And anyway, I mean, the idea that the West discovers, like for the most of Western history, even your beloved Enlightenment liberal thinkers, your utilitarian thinkers, were anti-homosexual behavior. They viewed it just like everyone else, that this is something that is deviant. That was your word, right? So... this is how this has been discovered, what empirical study has discovered that, oh, this is actually something that is not problematic and people should have the right to do that, and it will lead to what is the best society. You haven't even defined that. I've actually given very quantitative definitions. What does lead to human happiness based on empirical research, non-Muslim research, on what actually produces happy societies, happy human beings. You've only asserted the same kind of liberal narrative that we hear over and over and over again. So I mean, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, briefly, obviously I'm referring to societies that have come to that conclusion that homosexuality shouldn't be punished with death. That is very logically clear. That's quite obvious. That if I'm referring to how society has concluded that this is right and that is wrong, I'm referring to the society that has concluded that this is right and this is wrong. In a utilitarian liberal society, I wouldn't even define the liberal West as entirely utilitarian. I would rather say that they are driven to some extent by utilitarianism, which basically means usefulness to society, not literally, but that's what it translates to basically. But the liberal West has come to these conclusions because the liberal West pursues the happiness of humanity, of society, through equality and through freedom. Not completely by maximizing freedom, but rather by maximizing freedom from bigotry or freedom from government restrictions, for example. So obviously what I'm referring to is this, that the liberal West has come to this conclusion, not the liberal world has come to this conclusion. Supporting evidence to this is also that supporting evidence that other nations have come to this conclusion is that many nations around the world, besides just the liberal West, have come to conclude that homosexuality shouldn't be punished with death. And in fact, this is also an opinion that is becoming increasingly more popular among cultures, among Islamic cultures, that you could argue are under the influence of Western media and Western propaganda. But simply the fact that these people are accepting of this Western propaganda while they are living in their Islamic environments could be a point for me. But I know you will say that any supporting argument presented by me is just a story, and any supporting argument presented by you is the evidence. But sure, go on.
So at the beginning, just to get more substantive, I mentioned how many of these liberal concepts are fundamentally incoherent and actually vacuous. So when you talk about freedom, when you talk about equality and liberty, you can actually, there are many Islamist movements in modern history that claim that their religious values are completely conformant with freedom and liberty and human rights, right? They actually use that kind of language to justify Islamic law and Islamic values. They say that if you want to maximize human freedom, you need to submit to Quran and Sunnah, you need to submit to Islam. This is what maximizes human freedom. If you want to actually respect human rights, you have to abide by Islamic law, because Islamic law is the system that guarantees true human rights. I mean, this is a type of liberal argument that they're making because they're using that language. But the thing is that the term freedom and equality and liberty, these are hollow terms. You can fill them with any values, because at the end of the day, what is it? Who decides what's a human right? Who decides that certain things are human rights and other things are not? In Western theory and Western philosophy, human rights are based on an idea of what are fundamental human interests. What is it that's in the interest of a human being? And that is an empirical question. It can be answered empirically. But if you don't want to do that, like you can, if we don't want to appeal to science, Islamically, science is not the only arbiter of truth. Islam also has certain definitions and claims about what leads to human flourishing, human happiness, what truly is in the interests of human beings. For example, knowing your lineage, knowing who your father is, being in a stable family, this is in human interest. This is something that fundamentally affects your happiness in this life, and it also affects your salvation, because there's also correlation between religiosity and growing up in a stable family. But this kind of value of stable families, this is in human interest. So this is a human right. It's a human right to know your lineage, know your father, be with your mother and father and raised in that environment. It's a human right, and we have to protect that human right with Sharia, with hudud, with capital punishment. So this is a human rights argument for the Sharia and for hudud. And I can make that argument, and other Islamists, historically, I'm talking about historically, have made these kinds of arguments using liberal language. I mean, they were kind of in this mindset that freedom and equality and these values make sense, and they're just trying to, appropriate them. But I mean, this is an argument that could be made.
I think the comparison is very inappropriate, because you could give examples of people who make the same argument for Islam, that Islam ensures absolute human happiness and human freedom and human rights, for example. But what is the goal of Islam? What is Islamic philosophy based on? Liberalism is a philosophy, and you could argue that looking at philosophies, at the history of philosophies, Islam is also a philosophy. Religions are also philosophies, whereas liberalism has the end goal of providing, of looking for human happiness by using several means, of one of which is freedom, for example. What is the ultimate goal of Islam?
Happiness as well, in the sense of, from the human perspective, happiness in this life, flourishing in this life, and also salvation, which is happiness in the hereafter, and also the pleasure of one's creator and love for one's creator. These are all the ultimate goals of Islam.
So what you're saying is that what you're seeing here, not saying, is that Islam's ultimate goal is actually not human happiness, and to pursue and to find out what human happiness really is, and how we can truly figure out what human happiness is. The ultimate goal of Islam is the happiness of Allah, which means submission to Allah. That's what Islam basically means. Islam literally means submission. Just as let's distinguish these two. Both of these two are philosophies. Liberalism is a philosophy. Islam is a philosophy. Liberalism's main goal is human happiness, and in order to reach human happiness, liberalism uses equality and freedom. Islam is also a philosophy. The ultimate goal of Islam's philosophy is the happiness of Allah and submission to Allah. And in order to reach that submission, Islam uses submission to Allah, and you would also argue human happiness. So these two systems have completely different goals. So when you now argue that someone could also say for Islam that Islam ensures human rights and human happiness, which is why we should follow Islam, that's actually, it doesn't really, it's a misrepresentation of what liberals say when they say you should be liberal in order to reach human freedom, because the goal of liberalism is human happiness and equality, whereas the goal of Islam is the happiness of Allah, and it has pre-scripted, pre-written laws that you cannot change, you cannot alter. You have to justify those laws. Whereas in liberalism, you don't have to stick to certain laws. You have to pursue what is right, and you can change what is right based on your findings, which is why philosophers 200 years ago thought homosexuality is bad and should be punished, whereas people nowadays think it shouldn't be punished, and it's not. There is nothing terrible about it. Don't we agree on this?
I don't even understand. Like what I said was that Islam aim for human happiness as an end as well. Like that's part of that.
That's not true.
It is true. It's something that they're both conformant. Like the way to achieve human happiness in the grand scale of things is through submission to one's creator. Why? Because the creator has created you. He knows actually what is in your interest as a human being, whereas human beings themselves are very confused and ignorant, and they need revelation, they need guidance from the one who has created human beings. Whereas the liberal is using these vacuous terms. Like this is not my argument. This is actually the argument of a Harvard professor, Stephen Smith, who wrote The Disenchantment of Secular Discourse. And he said that these secular terms, like freedom, equality, and liberty, are vacuous. They're just empty, and they're used to smuggle in values that just come from the culture. Whatever is the status quo, whatever is popular, people just use the word freedom, and this is equality. We see this in American politics as well. Both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party argue that their policies are more conformant with freedom and equality, and that's what they're jostling back and forth on, but they have completely different policies in certain areas. So how can it both be the case that they're both conformant with freedom and equality? So what Stephen Smith says is that these are actually vacuous terms. The point that you're making about happiness is that, well, if people are able to decide, like this is what you kept saying, we decided as a society, why should we suppose that humans can arrive at a rational conclusion? Human beings in groups are very irrational, actually. They act irrationally, and they're very easily manipulated, right? Human beings are easily manipulated by government forces or by media. So this appeal to we collectively decide or we figure it out, I mean, this is very irrational, I would say, and it doesn't actually make sense. If we want to talk about happiness, there's an objective answer to that, and I've cited all of the research that tells you what human happiness actually entails.
Do you believe that slavery is an ideal system? Do you believe that that there should be slaves in a society?
Well, we're getting off the topic.
This is part of the conversation. Do you think slavery is okay?
Yeah. I mean, slavery is something that I do not find to be immoral. And I can give you an argument for that. But if you interrupt me, then there's no point.
I just don't want you to go into... You could lengthily... The thing is, you could go lengthily into citing one or two sources that argue why slavery is good or why slavery is okay.
You're interested in truth, right? So I try to give evidence-based arguments. If you're interested in that, I'll provide. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I understand.
The thing is, down seriously. I don't want to fight you. I don't want this to turn into a fight. I really came in good faith. I could have lengthily prepared many sources and gone into, well, this source says this source says that. If we had engaged in such a conversation, we would have a 5-hour talk, and we are already at 3 hours. I really wanted
bring it up, right? So if you bring it up, what do you want? You just want me to say yes, like a barbarian, and then you cut me off?
No. I really just want to have brief, logical discussions on the concept of slavery, for example. I don't want to go into lengthy papers. We can gladly look. If you want to have a debate with me, I would love to have a debate on issues. If you would like to have a debate, if people want to see that, if you think that's something that works, I would totally agree to have an actual debate with you where we prepare lengthy speeches and where we counter each other. Is that something that you would like to do?
Let's see how the reaction to this goes.
Sure.
If people think that it's useful to have a debate.
Sure, but as said, I'm just making a distinction. If we want to have a debate, I would love to do that, and then we can lengthily bring up your evidence and your reasons and your supporting evidence and this and that. But this is just not part of that. I mean, we are. I'm trying to logically argue for or against things here.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing as well.
Sure, go ahead.
Part of the conversation. I came to this discussion thinking that I'm going to have to defend very controversial issues, right? So if you want to defend something, you bring reasons, and reasons involve evidence. That's not just for debates. That's in conversation as well. I've actually been not in that many formal debates. So, okay, slavery, you want to talk about slavery? There's a very interesting quote from this anthropologist named David Graeber. He wrote a book called Debt, a 5,000-year history. Mm-hmm. But he's an accomplished anthropologist. Anyway, he says that if we brought someone like Aristotle, or we brought someone from the past to modern society, that figure from the past would think that most people in society are in fact slaves. Okay? They're actually in fact slaves, because our understanding of what is slavery, when we use that word, we think about chattel slavery, we think about 12 years a slave, things like this, these kinds of images of racial chattel slavery. And this is actually not historically universal. That's in America's history of transatlantic slavery. But most slavery in history did not look like that. In fact, every civilization, without exception, practiced slavery and slave labor within history, including Europe and so forth, with feudalism and transatlantic slavery, as I mentioned. So when it came to pre-modern societies, if one side defeats another side, you have two countries in a war, then what do you do with the losers? What does the losing side do? You either slaughter them or you enslave them. You can't just let them go and return, because they're going to be angry. They're going to reproduce, get stronger, and then come and pose a threat.
I completely agree.
Okay, so that's something that had to be the case in pre-modern societies, and Islam was their slavery was the slavery of Islam was not racially based. It was based on prisoners of war. In fact, Islam limited the avenues of entrance into slavery, and Islam was very good at integrating these conquered people into Muslim society, where the slave class ended up becoming very powerful and very knowledgeable, educated Muslims within overall Muslim society, because the Islamic state, Islamic law was not based on race, it was based on belief, as we discussed already. So, but the liberal mind has a problem with this idea of owning a person, right? Would you say that's the case? Because at the end of the day, okay, Islam treated slaves great and nice. That doesn't address the fundamental moral problem with slavery, according to the liberal mind. According to the liberal mind, ownership. It doesn't matter if the slave is living the life, an opulent life, but as long as he's owned, that is the problem. And the response to that is historically, slave labor was the dominant form of labor. Wage labor was actually relatively rare. And there was a debate historically around the time of the Industrial Revolution in American history where wage labor was increasing. And there was a debate on whether slave labor and wage labor are really distinct. Is there really a fundamental difference between wage labor and slave labor? And the argument that people would use is that slavery, is there a difference between owning someone versus renting someone? And this was a conceptual debate that they had, and many non-Muslim Western thinkers, liberal thinkers, argued that no, renting someone is worse, because think about the difference between owning a car and renting a car. When you rent a car, you drive it, you know, in a very abusive kind of way, as opposed to owning it, where that's your investment, you care about it. Anyway, so that's something that's uncomfortable for people who are raised in the West. But this is actually a reality, and this conceptually, this idea of renting a person versus owning a person, was there was no distinction between it. If you were a wage laborer historically, you might as well have been a slave. It's the same thing. It was the same thing within all of these societies. Even feudalism. Is feudalism really different from slavery? Even though you're given wages and you're given a portioned, a certain livelihood, is that really different from slavery? No, it's a basic concept. So the concepts, the legal concepts underlying slavery exist within the employer-employee contract of wage labor, and it's a cultural difference. In many cultures, there's not really a difference between saying that person A, like Ridvan, owns George. Okay, that's a slave relationship. Ridvan owns George. There's not really a difference between that and saying that George has a contractual obligation to Ridvan. Okay, because they both imply force. If you're contractually obligated to someone, that implies force, because if you don't pay up and you don't meet the contract, then you're liable to be punished by the law or punished by Ridvan, and Ridvan can extract that debt from you by force, and if you don't pay up, he can prosecute you. The sheriff can come and can execute you. So there's inherent violence in all contractual agreements, and this is something that leftist and communist thinkers were arguing in the 20th century, because they want to say that capitalism is essentially coercive. Capitalism is no different than slavery, and so you have this entire communist, leftist, Marxist tradition of arguing that capitalism is really fundamentally no different than slavery. So these are things that we can analyze and talk about at great length, but these are some of the ideas that we should pursue in our hunger for truth.
The problem is, Daniel, I really just let you speak because I wanted to demonstrate something, and I don't mean any offense, but I think you have talked for about 6 or 7 minutes about slavery, and I really just asked the question because I wanted to get to a single point, which was about how you can define the concept of slavery from the perspective of a slave, how you can combine that with the concept of essential or eventual human happiness. But we went into a great conversation on the history and logic of slavery, whereas I completely agree that slavery is an essential part of human history. For example, you would think that I will come with one of these typical imbecile objections and will think, oh, slavery is evil. How dare people enslave people in history? How dare the Confederates do this and Muhammad do this and do that? No, I don't think like that at all. I think that slavery is completely historically, logically justified. I would indeed. That is what you said about how slavery was necessary, because if there are two societies, two towns, or two tribes, and they fight and have victory over the other, what essentially needs to be done is, because in old times, in past times, these two societies basically their entire purpose is to rival and to defeat each other, to be superior over each other, to subjugate the other, because that's how society worked back then. It was completely normal, completely logical to enslave the defeated side, because if you don't enslave them, if you just let them go and take their stuff, they will eventually come back and take your stuff from you and probably enslave you or massacre you. That's completely within a historical perspective, that's completely reasonable. I completely agree with that. I completely think that slavery is an undeniable, necessary part of our human past. And although that might sound offensive to some people, that is simply true. I do think, however, that slavery was over the last centuries, it was extended into the centuries when it was completely unnecessary. The point, however, is it doesn't really matter whether slavery should have continued or shouldn't have continued, because the whole question would have come down to how can you combine the idea that slavery is okay in Islam with the idea that Islam strives for eventual human happiness, when Islam wouldn't have abolished slavery in today's time, and Islam would still continue slavery in today's time if it wasn't for international human rights laws and forces and laws pushed by the West. Slavery didn't end in the Islamic world because the Islamic world decided that it's no longer useful. Slavery ended in the Islamic world because the Islamic world was forced by the liberal West to end slavery in order to continue, in order to be part of the United Nations, in order to be part of basic interactions, of basic trade, of basic international laws. And when you look at the concept of slavery, you say that you might say that slavery in the Islamic sense is not equal to slavery in some other cultures, because you are not free to beat a slave or to brutally beat a slave or to kill a slave or to several other atrocities against slaves, and you are supposed to take care of the rights of slaves. It is an undeniable fact that in Islam, a slave is still a slave, and a slave is basically, in Muhammad's own words, still owned by a Muslim and used by a Muslim, basically compared to a horse by in Muhammad's own words as well. In the Islamic sense, a slave is someone whose freedom completely depends on a free Muslim's choice. A Muslim can choose to free a slave, but a Muslim can also choose not to free a slave and can choose to buy and acquire as many slaves as a Muslim wants through war or through the slave market. This includes labor slaves and slave girls, with which a Muslim can have non-consensual sex with, for example. This has existed throughout society. Now, you could argue that this is somehow similar to the modern system, where people have to work their behinds off in order to have a proper living in the West, and that this is somehow comparable to slavery. But that is absurd. That is ridiculous, because when you're thinking about a slave who is completely dependent on the mercy of his owner. A slave has no choice in freeing himself, except and if he doesn't want to convert to Islam. If he doesn't want to convert to Islam, for example, he has no choice in freeing himself. In some cases, he can make a contract with his owner and say, "Hey, I want to work off my price and free myself," and it is at the owner's discretion, according to some scholars, and the owner should should listen to the slave according to other scholars and then make a contract and free the slave. But in many cases throughout history in Islamic society, we have seen that slaves went on as slaves for generations. Slaves gave birth to slaves, who gave birth to slaves, who gave birth to slaves, and so on. You cannot possibly compare that to a Western system, to a Western capitalist system, for example, in which a person works for years, but can also do with his own life whatever he wants. He can choose a job, choose this job, choose that job, be self-employed, go to a different country and choose a job there, and go on lengthy vacations, have their own home, have whatever home they want, have whatever rights they want, and be completely equal in front of the law. It is simply utilitarian. I'm going to use that word again. That a society which has free individuals and no slavery is ultimately much happier, much more progressive, much more productive, as we see in the West. We have made much more production and much more progress than Islamic societies have made in 500 years. Than it is to have a system of slaves. We can say that
you appeal to the productiveness of the West.
Of course, I did, because it's useful. It's good.
I took 5 minutes to morally defend slavery. You're taking 10 minutes just to tell people what many of your non-Muslims already feels and has been taught for years.
To make a point, yeah.
How's that going contrary to the status quo and trying to argue? You spend 10 minutes just repeating the same points that everyone already. It's not like you're just reading back people's biases to them. Like, that's not very interesting.
To make a point.
Slavery bad. Yes, we know.
See. I will let the audience decide what to think of this. Whether I was speaking. The entire point of this was to point out that I asked you a basic question and you went on to a whole 5-6 minute summary of slavery in history, which was completely irrelevant. Whereas my whole question.
You asked me about slavery. I responded about slavery, and that was irrelevant.
My whole question was about the last minute of my talk, which was, how do you compare a system where you are subject to a free human's mercy? And the Quran clearly says we have we have chosen some over others, and that the slavery and the human are not equal. The Quran itself justifies that logic. How can you say that an Islamic society with slaves is more for eventual human happiness than a Western society, for example, where someone can choose where they want to work and can do with their lives whatever they want? That was the entire point of the question.
So the one thing the whole point that I was making is that there isn't a fundamental difference conceptually and legally between the logic of being a wage worker and being a slave. Okay, that was the whole point of what I was saying, and I cited David Graeber, or I can cite other anthropologists and historians, and these leftist.
You can cite whomever you want. Just make the point.
Let me finish. The leftist theorists and the communists were arguing that, look, there's not much. Fine, you can choose between working at McDonald's or working at Burger King. Okay, this is the reality of choice for the majority of human beings living in the West. They are wage laborers. And they work hard. Some of them have to work multiple minimum wage jobs, working 80 hours a week just to be able to live, just to be able to survive. This is a reality based on what we see in the world today, and that's wage labor. It's very different than slave labor, because the slave is part of the household.
Okay, we don't need to cite studies in order to see which one is better.
It should be like you and not cite anything. And
just it is ridiculous to cite arguments to find out whether.
Why are you objecting to me citing evidence? Listen to the point.
Because the question is very simple. You don't need to cite an argument to figure out whether you will be happy going to a school or you will be happy living in a basement. You don't need to cite. You don't need to cite a study. You don't need to cite a study to find out if you will be happy in a 1-room house or in a 5-room house.
Look,
that's the most ridiculous thing I've heard.
The reality of happiness in the West, the institutionalization from birth.
Very, very simple question. Very simple question.
And it involves slavery by another name.
Very simple question.
Slavery. The difference between
very simple question. Very simple question. No, you have to answer the question. Very simple question. I have a very simple question. Daniel, I have a very simple question. do you think society is happier with individuals? Don't get into how you can define slavery. Do you think logically, and everyone can agree, can participate in this discussion and in this question? Do you think a society is happier when numerous people in that society are enslaved and have no control over their own freedom, their travel, their means, their house, and anything at all, and are not equal in front of the law? Or a society in which people work hard, but can eventually choose their own jobs, make their own careers, and go wherever the hell they want? Which society do you think is happier?
I'm saying the distinction that you're making is incoherent.
There's no distinction. It's a simple question. Which society is happier?
The distinction that what you're appealing to as the free society, the utopia that everyone can choose what they want to do, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the West.
It exists everywhere. You're speaking like one of those incoherent movies or like 1984, or like what are those whole books called that were written in the first half of the 20th century. That's how you're speaking. I'm asking a very simple question: which society is better? Which society is happier? Which
society is better?
Not better. I misspoke. Happier.
Where everyone is a billionaire. And
I misspoke. Happier.
Is that society better, or a society that doesn't have?
I misspoke. I'm not saying happier. Which society is happier? I'm not saying better. I'm saying happier. Which society is happier? Very simple question. You don't need to cite anything for that.
So slavery, okay. Which society is better, right?
No, happier.
I'm asking you an analogous question because the question is framed in a problematic way. You're using terms without reflecting on the meaning of the terms.
I'm asking you a very simple question. Why don't you just answer the question? Which society is ultimately happier?
A society that doesn't have any hierarchy is what you're appealing to. A society where everyone is equal at the same level. This is the argument from Robert Nozick.
I haven't said that.
Huh?
I haven't said that. I haven't made that point.
So do all societies have hierarchy? Is that inevitable?
They have hierarchies, of course. That wasn't the question.
Is a society with hierarchy better or happier, or a society without hierarchy? Which one's happier?
It depends. That wasn't the question. That's a completely different discussion.
Okay, you can say it depends, but I can't say it depends. Why can't you answer a simple question, Ridwan?
What?
What
question? Because that's a whole different discussion. That's not part of our conversation.
With hierarchy better or happier, or without hierarchy? Which society is happier?
I would say some hierarchies are necessary, which answers the question. But that's not the question
as well.
That is not the question.
Hierarchy are better as well.
That is not the question. That is like me asking.
Others. Hierarchy, for those who don't know what hierarchy means some people are below others. Some people are higher and some people are below. You just said that societies inevitably will have hierarchy.
Of course, but that's not slavery. This is like me asking, hey, do you think it's okay to be a slave? And then you say, well, you are a slave to computer games, which you find good. So what's the problem with that? This is the exact same thing. You're playing with words that have no relation to the topic at hand at all. I'm asking you a very simple question which you have refused to answer.
A word that you're using and that many use in a very unreflective, uneducated way, and I'm trying to bring some nuance and erudition to the concept.
I take that as a compliment.
I hope that your audience is interested. I think that I don't know if you have an educated audience. My audience is interested in facts and argumentation and reason.
I highly doubt that.
Muslims are interested in reason and argumentation.
Well, they don't really follow it. They're not the greatest example for that in the world. But
I think they can judge based on this broadcast.
Okay, sure. So we haven't answered the simple question: which society is happier? The society that have. I get it.
You didn't answer either. You didn't answer a simple question.
I did answer. It's like answering the question: do you think it's better to be a slave, or do you think it's better to be free? And then saying, well, I think it's okay to be a slave to computer games. That's basically what you did.
That's not what I said.
You cannot compare slavery to.
Slavery is a fundamental.
It has nothing to do with defining slavery. I'm asking you a very simple question.
Hierarchy is a fundamental component of every society.
Okay, fine.
Structure of slavery is found in our society and is experienced by the lowest classes of people. That exists, and it's much more dystopian in the current modern world than it was. Slaves in Muslim world
Daniel,
were much better treated and had a much higher quality of life and were much happier.
Okay, I concede. Okay.
Average poor employee living in the slums of any of these modern nation states.
I concede. I agree that Western nations have a system, have a hierarchy, and I agree that you could possibly define people who work very hard as slaves, if you so want to. I'm asking the question again: do you think a society in which slavery, where people are completely dependent on the mercy of their masters and their owners, where they have to do what their owners say, and they don't have the freedom to live their life as they wish, that society and a Western society, for example, just for the sake of the example,
that's not the case in Western society. Your question, the way you're framing it is not me.
Okay, forget about Western society. A society where people have to work very hard to make a living, but where they can also freely choose their jobs and move to places, buy their own homes, go up and down in ladders, pursue a different education, choose jobs and homes, and go to different and move to different countries. Which society is happier, fundamentally happier?
In Islamic society as well. You're creating a false dichotomy. You're creating
I'm not. I didn't even give an example for that example. I'm just asking you a question. Which example is a better society?
You said the Western. You said Western.
No, I just said I'm not saying the Western. I said it first, but I'm not. I'm saying now. I don't mean the West. I don't mean West. I'm just giving you an example. This society and that society. Which society is happier? Which society will ultimately be happier?
Society that doesn't have. If people's quality of life is increased by what you mentioned, then yes, that's a happier society, but it's something that is fantasy.
Okay, fantastic. So the point has remained unanswered after 20 minutes or 10 minutes. Fantastic. This is... at least I'm happy to know that Muslims are after truth.
I thought it was interesting that you said that slavery is justified historically. I was actually surprised that you said that. So, because most people will bring up, well, the Prophet Muhammad had slaves.
I'm honest. I don't know how much you have followed me, but I'm saying everything as it is about Islam. I'm not here to lie. The truth is as problematic as it already is.
But one thing can we talk about this one point
Sure.
where you said that you mentioned the quality of life in the West and the progress that the West has made, and that shows how people are happier in the West today than they are in other places in the world. And you had said earlier that this is because of values, Western values, liberal values. Why is it the case that you have many countries in the world, such as in Eastern Europe, in South America, in parts of Africa, that have adopted these values? Because they're not Muslim, these are non-Muslim countries, but they suffer from poverty, from economic depression, despite the fact that they have these values of liberalism, freedom, and equality. How do you explain that? If it's just values, that results in progress and advancement, then
I wouldn't think it's just values that do that. I would think values are a big part of that. And considering that Western society was built on these values, although when Western society has pursued those values with the interruption of the Christian dominance and the Catholic Church, which was eventually opposed and defeated by the reforms, by Protestantism, and eventually by the Enlightenment. Western society has been built on these values and has existed with these values for 2,000 years. I would argue that Western society has come to the point that it has been successful because
it's not a Christian.
I'm
you
not
think
Christian.
The values of the West originated with Christianity 2,000 years ago?
No, I'm speaking of when we speak of Western values in history and in society, we're speaking of the Greek and the Roman origins of society. Western society was not unique in that. Western society was not one entity. Western society spread as an empire and forced other Western, geographically Western societies to change and to adopt the Western values, which we nowadays call Western values. We base these Western values on old Greek philosophical ideas, on values of the Roman Empire, on later Christianity, and finally on Enlightenment values. This is what Western values are about. You could consider Christianity as part of that or not. I would personally say that Christianity is a part of that, but that Christianity is also, you don't have to credit Christianity for it, but it is part of it. Yeah.
So then what about these other Christian countries, like I said, who have also been Christian for centuries, and they have had access to the Enlightenment value, but they are suffering economically. They haven't, in 100 years, over 100 years of having constitutions and democracies and freedom of speech and all of these values, they are still suffering, and they haven't developed.
Which countries? Give me an example.
Look at any country in Eastern Europe. Look at even, some would say, any country in South America, Central America. Eastern European countries are not entirely based on Western values, which is why we don't group them. When we group cultural groups, we don't group them as the West. We group them as East or Eastern Europe. That's because they were partially separated, both at the beginning and also especially after the adoption of Christianity. These two cultures were separated by the schism of Christianity between West and East, and Western cultures, such as all the Central European cultures, Western European cultures, have stayed loyal, have been built upon much more on the ideas of old Greek philosophy than the Roman Empire, than the Eastern part. The Eastern part has grown for at least 500 years separately than the Western part. How about Greece itself? How about Greece, the economically depressed country of Greece?
Greece itself. Greece was under
ancient Greek values.
Greece has reached its independence from the imperialist Islamic Empire, which suppressed it only 100 years ago. How can you compare that?
100 years ago? So yeah. I'm just trying to understand, like, where these values are so magical that bring progress and development. So many of these countries that I'm bringing you as an example, and you always have an excuse like, oh, it was Orthodox Christianity doesn't lead to success and progress that's found in Eastern Europe. Only Catholicism.
That's not Western values.
Is Western values.
That's not the West. The West is the West. The West is not the East. The West is the West.
Yeah. So why? What's the success of the West based on? And you're saying that it's Greek philosophy, Western Christianity, Catholicism, and Protestantism, and Enlightenment values. Like, these three things have very little to do with each other and come from completely different time periods and historical context. Somehow, magically, is a secret formula that brings progress. So that means the rest of the world that didn't have Christianity for 2,000 years and didn't have the influence of the church, then they can't ever have the success of the West. Is that what you're saying?
That's not what I said. No, that's absolutely not what I said.
What do you attribute that success to? And you're mentioning 2,000 years of Christianity. So what's
I'm saying that I'm saying that Western values have made the West better, have made the West great. In fact, I would say that Enlightenment values, which only happened within the last few centuries, are largely responsible for how the West has developed since then. And even before that, the separation of Western countries into a unity of Christian nations, but separated into nation states, also built on very old, very ancient philosophical ideas, have helped the West to develop in a very great way. But Enlightenment values have definitely made the West much better than it is. But I don't understand the point. The question here was to compare Western liberalism to Islamic society, whereas Western liberalism is something that has a history of like 200-300 years, and Islamic society is right there. That was the comparison. I don't understand the
comparison. Is that you're saying that I'm asking you, what is the success of the West based on? And you just waffle. You say that it's 2,000 years of Christian history.
That wasn't your question.
Greece, then ancient Greece. Now you're saying liberal values. So liberal values exist and have existed in the global South, within these developing countries for generations. right? Because partly because they were colonized, so they were forced to adopt those kinds of values in South America, Eastern Europe, Africa, and a lot of Asia. So those values were imposed, and they're still, after many generations, over 100 years, they haven't seen the kind of development and quality of life that the West enjoys. So your explanation that it's the values that leads to prosperity is fundamentally undermined by that reality. If you want to say that, okay, fine, it's not just liberal values, there's also Christianity, the history of the Catholic Church, that also leads to progress that the West developed under, then that means the rest of the world can never achieve development and that quality of life, because they don't have 2,000 years of Christian history. So does the West have a responsibility to allocate resources to all of these other developing countries, all of these people who don't have the privilege of a 2,000-year Christian history? Should the West continue to dominate them and have this kind of force? Here, answer this question. Is there a world better, a world where the West is in a position of complete dominance? Is that a happier world, or a world where the West redistributes all of its wealth to everyone else and raises the quality of life of everyone to an equal level across the globe through forced redistribution? Which one is a happier world? Can you answer that question?
I don't know. That's a very different scenario that I wouldn't
answer. The simple question: which one's happier?
How is that a simple question? You would have to think.
No, it's simple. Happier. The West having all the resources, or 90% of the wealth of the world in the hands of the West, and everyone else having to deal with the scraps and the crumbs of the West. Is that a happier world, or a world where everything is distributed equally over all countries for all people? Which one's a happier world?
I don't know. Maybe it would be.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Maybe it would be if the West distributes everything equally to the rest of the world. Maybe it would be if the West dominates and the others just follow suit. I just don't
domination can lead to a better, happier result. I thought you were utilitarian.
No, that's not what I mean by that. What I mean, I don't understand what that has to do with our discussion, with our point.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
I seriously don't understand how this has to do with what this has to do with the point. I don't get it. Your question was what makes liberal Western society better, and why are other cultures not as good as Western society? And then you started talking about how, according to my thought, because I agree that Western society is happy, I must also logically argue that other cultures which don't follow the ideals of Western society can't be equally happy, which is not true, because I said the opposite at the very beginning. I gave Japan as an example. Japan might be, to certain extents, under the influence of a Western worldview due to what happened after the Second World War, but it is far off Western culture and the Western idea of liberalism and the Western idea of religion and tradition. I don't understand where you're getting it with this.
The Japanese history, Japan was a fascist empire. They lost.
They were a racist empire.
Yeah, they're racist. So they had all that progress that you're now citing as an example from fascism and racism. So why aren't those values being adopted by the rest of the world? Why should liberal values, if progress, you're citing Japan and the West, if that's the ultimate goal, then why shouldn't fascism and racism be adopted as opposed to this liberal Enlightenment thought? I'm just trying to draw out the implications of the answers that you're giving. That's all my questions are based on.
I see. We're going to a completely different line of thoughts here, but I don't think Japan is a very good comparison to this whole issue, because Japan is the whole philosophy, the whole idea behind the nation of Japan is that Japan is a glorious nation which was divinely created by the gods, and that the Japanese people are the superior, the divine kind on earth, which deserve to eventually rule over the rest of the world. That was the entire idea of Japan. The problem with comparing Japan to cultures like Europe, for example, is that Japan wasn't in constant interaction with other races and other cultures. Japan was among each other and had a system among each other. Japan started booming, especially after the Second World War, after their system was defeated and crushed, and they have started adopting a more Western style of living and and focused on getting rid of tradition and focusing on simple productivism. So I don't.
Yeah, that Western system was opposed because the U.S. took over their government and their economy.
It was imposed. It's just true. Yeah, it was imposed.
Yeah, their progress and their quality of life reached the level it did before World War II because of values that are very different than liberalism. That's the only point I was making. So it's not liberalism that's leading to progress.
Well, the U.S. even imposed values on them 100 years or at least half a century before the Second World War. So we could argue about that forever, but I'm not here to argue. That this is the thing. You might have argued with other people that they argue against imposing Islam on other societies and dominating other cultures, but they might be falling into a hypocrisy because they themselves believe that values should be imposed on other cultures. I don't believe that. I don't believe that we should be imposing liberalism or we should be imposing our own values on different cultures. That's not what I believe at all. I don't think that Brunei or that Saudi Arabia or that other cultures should be forced invaded and forced to change their system if they are oppressive. I believe that Brunei, for example, can be forced by cutting off relationships and cutting off trade with them and saying, hey, if you want to communicate with us and trade with us, then you have to abide by basic human rights that we have established. If you don't abide by these, then we have nothing to do with you. And that I don't think is considered forcing. But I don't personally believe that we should be forcing liberalism or any ideas of freedom on other cultures. That's not what I believe in at all. So,
well, I mean, this is the contradiction, right? This is the contradiction that you're singing the praises of the advanced West that has living a wonderful quality of life, but that quality of life came about through brutal imperialism, brutal colonization, brutal genocide, stealing the resources. That's how you get the West 90% of the resources of the entire world. It's through coercion, through force, through rape and genocide. And now you're sitting and praising this civilization, but then sitting back with this mealy-mouthed kind of excuse. I don't agree with imposing values.
I don't.
Completely inconsistent.
No, I believe that the West is in liberalism and Enlightenment ideas. The West has found a great system, which is based on the whole idea of finding out what is true and guaranteeing human happiness by certain means, like slowly making progress. That's actually a core idea of liberalism, which we should have talked about long ago. The core idea of liberalism is that we should slowly make gradual progress, which is why people have different ideas 200 years ago and different ideas now. That is what we're pursuing, and it goes very well. I'm sorry, it is going much better than any system in the world so far.
It's amazing.
If you want to dispute that, go ahead and dispute that.
Such an amazing system that it's led to unprecedented amounts of wealth and dominance. Yeah,
of course it does.
But it's like such an amazing system that other countries in the world that adopt this system, for some reason, aren't able to achieve progress, aren't able to achieve the same quality of life. What a mystery. Why is that?
That has nothing to do with liberalism. That's
this magical formula of Enlightenment values. Why isn't Mexico? Why isn't Brazil? Why aren't these other countries, Argentina, Ukraine, all of these countries around the world who are liberal and have the same kinds of values, experiencing the same progress and enlightenment and enrichment of quality of life that these Western countries are experiencing? It's a big mystery. It's just one of those questions that we'll never know. We'll never know the answer.
Number one, I have never, ever, throughout this entire conversation, I've never said that it is liberalism alone that uplifts cultures and that this is the reason the Western cultures are better. I'm saying
progress. You said progress that is gradually leading to betterment of society. That's exactly what you just.
No, I'm saying this is the philosophy. I'm not saying this happens everywhere, and I'm not saying that Western society owes all its success to liberalism. That's not what I'm saying. Not to liberalism alone. That is, I've never argued that, and I've never said that all Western countries are making progress. I'm saying that the idea behind liberalism is to make gradual progress for human happiness, and that this is a great system which has worked in many societies, in many Western cultures, and is also working very well in many other cultures, like in Turkey, for example, which is compared to the Middle Eastern neighbors, which don't adhere to the idea of secular liberalism, doing very well. Excuse me. If you want to give examples of South America and Eastern Europe, those are also coincidentally doing much better than the Islamic world, which is suffering and constantly blaming all its failures on the West. And everybody is constantly witnessing how the Islamic world is crying about how it is all the West's fault that we are suffering so much, which is very ironic because we have just given the example of Japan, which was stupid. We have just given the example of Japan, which was completely flattened in the Second World War and is currently booming and among the best countries to live in the world. So it's really strange to make such correlations and such accusations. So we're not really getting anywhere with this. But if you want to stay on this point, you're not winning, Daniel.
No. Let me just point about apostasy, just to wrap it up.
Sure. Why should I be punished? He will go again into how that serves the happiness of society, and
because all of the previous arguments were based on kinship and family relations and building stable families, but when it comes to apostasy, it's based on similarity between people. So shared values, like being the same religion, because historically Islam was not based on race. Islam did not have ethnic and racial conflict like you'd see in other empires, like the Roman Empire and so forth, because it wasn't racial or ethnic. It was on the basis of similar religion. So this is a source of order and cohesion as well. And those who basically leave the religion, they pose a major threat to that social order and that social cohesion. And this is a very violent act to leave the religion, because all of society is based, that cohesion and order. There's not a top-down structure that is imposing like you see in the West and in the modern nation state. You have society that has this logic of cohesion because of similarity in religion. We have the same values, and all of these like family structure, family relations, social structure, communal structure, and so forth at every level depends on a shared religious belief. So if someone opts out of that, it threatens that order. And so there is a clear harm to people in life. Obviously, we can talk about the afterlife and the harm that's caused by someone leaving Islam, but we're just making points that a non-Muslim would agree with. There is tangible harm to society when you have defectors, and every society punishes defectors, often with death. And liberal society is no different. Modern liberal society is no different in punishing defectors. And we see this to this day, but definitely throughout the colonial period, that the liberal colonizers, when they take over certain territories, they punish with death, with imprisonment, anyone who speaks out against the liberal secular order and the colonial powers. We saw this throughout North Africa, in the subcontinent. Millions of Muslims were killed because of their opposition, their ideological opposition to liberalism. Okay, so they defected from the colonial power. The liberal powers justified that, look, we are trying to maintain our power, therefore we have to kill these defectors, because if Muslims start speaking against us, the colonizer, then they're going to, we're the minority, they're going to band together and they're going to overthrow us, they're going to fight jihad against us and expel us. So we cannot allow any dissension and defection. We have to punish things like disrespect to the French symbols or the British symbols, disrespect to British values or French values or Dutch values. We have to punish that very severely. And liberal thinkers justified that. And they said that, such figures like John Stuart Mill, that the savages, you have to limit their freedom of speech. You have to limit them because you're trying to civilize them. You're trying to bring them to a state of civilization. So you have to limit their speech very severely in order to do that. Then once the liberal order is established, then suddenly, and there's no threat to the liberal order, then suddenly you're tolerant of free speech. When I, for example, speak against the U.S. government, like someone might say, no one in a secular country is killed for denouncing the government. No one is killed in the West for denouncing Donald Trump or any of these regimes or presidents. See how much freedom of speech we have? See how much tolerance we have? Well, this is like comparing apples and oranges, because you can't really compare that to apostasy. In these Western states, Donald Trump is not threatened if I call him an idiot. If Donald Trump and the U.S. regime is not threatened by me speaking out against him. If I were to reach a position and more people were thinking about going against the government, then the government would crack down. Then suddenly free speech is no longer allowed. So it's very convenient of the West and of liberal regimes that when their power is not secure, they do not allow free speech. In fact, they kill people, they kill defectors. And then once they've entrenched power, then they'll allow things that don't actually threaten their power. Whereas in Islam, apostasy is a major threat to the individual's happiness, his family's happiness, his community's happiness. So there is a practical benefit to deterring it, and you deter it with severe punishment and capital punishment. So that's the argument.
I would say that doesn't answer a single question. I appreciate the points you've made, but I don't think it answers a question. I think it is very similar to how many modern Muslims attempt to justify apostasy by bringing up treason in the West, for example, or treason in other cultures, for example, where you reveal the secrets of the state and then the state wants to go after you. No, I understand it is different, but I think it is very similar, because I don't think any example that you have given actually justifies or is actually similar to the system of apostasy in Islam in any way. Even if you consider that these that an Islamic society and the Western society are fundamentally different. In the West, no one is being persecuted, no one is being prosecuted, because they have endangered the society and endangered the foundations of society through speech that is unacceptable.
You think the civil rights leaders were not cracked down on, imprisoned, and killed?
Of course they were, but of course they were, and they argued for.
Why was Martin Luther King assassinated?
They argued.
Why were these figures assassinated in the West?
I don't understand how that's a good comparison.
Racial equality. Why were they assassinated?
I don't understand how that's a good comparison, because you would argue that people like Martin Luther King argued for the foundations, argued for the progress of liberalism. So the authorities of the liberal American state
from the status, of course, right?
Of course, but that's a very different example. I mean, you are comparing people who argue for better rights, for equality, which is, by the way, a value of liberalism. Martin Luther King and people like him were part of this movement, of the civil rights movement, because of liberalism, because they argued for better liberal values. And the authorities that opposed them, and the people that opposed them, and the people that eventually conceded, were the gatekeepers of old liberalism, which eventually changed into the better version of liberalism. That's the entire point of liberalism, to gradually make social progress. If you cannot compare that to leaving Islam and an Islamic society, because number one, in a liberal society, if you want to protest and you want to make social progress, you're wanting to change society for the better. You are comparing that to Islam. In Islamic society, you cannot make society better. It's not possible. You leave Islam. You are no longer a Muslim. You're not arguing for anything or against anything. The only thing you're doing is to say, hey, I do not believe in Islam anymore, and that's your crime, and you are killed for that. Now, of course, we can go into how you are given 3 days and you are given the chance to repent, and you don't have to be public about it. You can keep it to yourself. But what is clear is clear. what happens is I leave Islam because I just don't believe in it anymore. I'm not a hypocrite. Why would I pretend to be a Muslim when I don't believe in it anymore? This is a phenomenon that is happening all over the Muslim world. And just because I don't believe in it anymore, and I explain why I don't believe in it anymore, and I'm not convinced by the authorities that give me 3 days to repent, I'm suddenly sentenced to death. I haven't done anything. I haven't challenged anything. I haven't tried to change anything. I haven't tried to too quickly change a society that should be changed slowly.
You've changed a lot. You've defected from your family, from your wider community, from your society. That has a huge effect. Like, wait, your parents are still Muslim?
Sorry?
Are your parents still Muslim?
Yes, they are.
So you're telling me that they weren't affected by you leaving Islam?
Of course they were. Our relationship is severely harmed.
Yeah, so that's a big harm to them
because they are Muslims. Because they are told to shun me. How is that? How is it a point for you?
The point is simply that there's harm caused. The harm has a ripple effect that affects all of society if people start defecting. And like I said, it's universal. All societies have punishments to deter defection, and liberal society is no different. And that's why I bring the example of the civil rights movement. When you have these muscular, defection ideologically is less of a problem when you have a muscular surveillance state, because that state is going to impose technologically, coerce, and force you into compliance. So there's a higher bar because of that state that creates all of these other problems that we already discussed. But when you have an organic social order and you don't have the nation state, then defection becomes much more serious in disrupting and causing massive amounts of harm, violence, and damage to those societies. So those societies have to have very harsh penalties for defection. And even within the muscular state, technocratic state, defection is still punished when it gets to a certain level that it does threaten the order. That's what happened with the civil rights movement. It became a movement, and you had a 1 million man march. You had people who were actually becoming a serious threat. Then the assassination started happening. The brutality started happening. That's free speech according to liberalism.
You know what I think? I think we should have gone into this whole apostasy topic much earlier, maybe at the beginning of the conversation, because I think this whole topic is where you're not winning anybody over, and you're even losing people. And so I think we should have gone into this much earlier. So we are comparing a system where Islam wants to establish its authority and its dominance and its survival, and in order to and the argument you are making, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think your approach to justifying Islam and Islamic law is a very unorthodox approach, because I would expect a traditionalist Muslim to not use scientific means or certain means where you explain how logically punishing apostasy is good for society, but rather the Islamic way for arguing for that would be just to say, well, this is what Islam demands, and what Islam demands is right, or what Allah demands is right. Because what it looks like to me is, sorry?
That's what you expected our conversation to be? That I would just say...
No, I don't. No, I wouldn't. It's not what I expected our conversation to be. I think when people who defend Islam resort to using certain ideas in order to justify why their Islamic laws make sense, rather than sticking to the Islamic fundamental sources, which don't actually give us any reasons why apostasy is wrong, I would think that that's an unorthodox of arguing for Islam, and which I think even many Islamic scholars have criticized and shunned as apologetics in Islam, which is considered deviant by many traditionalist Muslim scholars.
When you look at Islamic history and Islamic scholarship, when they would write about different rulings within Islam, they would write about the wisdoms, the hikmah of different rulings, and they would appeal to a wide variety of arguments. And they did this on the basis that Islam is a rationally coherent religion, and that someone who is a non-Muslim can come to see the wisdom and the beauty of Islam by reflection. and thinking deeply and thinking clearly. This was a fundamental belief throughout Muslim history from the very beginning, that reason is a core value within Islam. And when you read the Quran, Allah, the Creator, is constantly appealing to human reason. Like, do they not reflect? Do they not think? Do they not ponder? And so Muslims scholarship has never been opposed to bringing in different arguments and different reasons to try to justify and appeal to non-Muslims, because we would go nowhere if I just said that Islam is right, just accept it as right. That's not an argument, right? I have to bring reasons that you would accept, and that's why I talk about I bring in philosophy, anthropology. I try to bring these things in because you can look them up for yourself, you can reflect, and so forth.
Okay. To finalize this point, I think we should be wrapping up soon. We haven't clarified apostasy fully, so you have basically justified how apostasy serves for the preservation of Islamic society, and how defecting from Islamic society, harms people, harms relationships, harms the relationship between me and my parents, for example. You have given examples of how in Western society thought that goes strictly against the system has been punished in history, although we don't see that opposing. I mean, for example, you argue for very strict Islamic points and an Islamic government, Islamic traditionalism, whereas you live in America. That should be by that logic, that should be the most opposing, the most problematic opinion, the most problematic political position that you can have. Yet you are not in any trouble, and you will most likely not ever be in any trouble throughout the rest of your life. Although you are in America, which is a liberal society, and you argue completely against it and completely for Islamic law, which nobody wants and nobody likes, and society is ruled by the majority of what society wants. So I still don't get how you could possibly give these examples or go out of these examples and justify why Islam would impose people to forcibly stay loyal to its system, even when people don't want to stay loyal, even when people want to go out of it. How is that justified? How would God want that? How is that good for society?
I mean, I'm just reiterating the points. So Islam has reasons for its values and the laws and the punishments and all of Islamic ethics, and the claim is that that system is going to maximize human happiness. Like, you make this argument, and I've cited all kinds of reasons and studies. So on that basis that it does that, anything that will undermine that system of family, that system of community, if you start saying that, no, Islam's teaching on sexuality is actually false, and we have to start practicing adultery and fornication and homosexuality. If someone comes and does that, that causes massive amounts of damage and harm, because of families start breaking down. Right?
Let's not go into deviance. Let's come to converting to Christianity, for example. Someone wants to, or an entire family wants to convert to Christianity from Islam, or wants to convert to Buddhism from Islam, for example. They're not advocating for sexual perversion or deviance or anything like that. They simply want to convert to Christianity and live a peaceful life, or convert to Buddhism and live a very peaceful life. What is wrong with that?
Well, there's many other aspects to social cohesion that we haven't really talked about. So one part of social cohesion is similarity in dress, similarity in practice, like coming to a central place of worship and bowing together in the same ritual actually has a great deal of effect on people's willingness to be altruistic, to help each other, to support each other, to not harm each other. That practice by itself, which is a part of Islam, like congregational prayer. So all of society doing that, dressing in a certain way, speaking a certain way, your language, right? The language that you use to communicate. Like Muslims, even though they speak all the languages of the world, we have shared vocabulary in Arabic, because Arabic is the language of revelation. So that creates bonds and a type of connection and unity that makes the Muslim community strong, and it protects the Muslim community from external threats because you have this kind of in-group sense of loyalty, and that protects that community and that society from external threats. If someone within that community starts saying, no, I'm not Muslim anymore, it disrupts all of that cohesion, and it also makes the group less unified. There's less in-group unity, and that makes it more vulnerable to existential threats from the outside. So these are all practical reasons that I'm giving you.
But why would practical reasons matter to the end goal of Islam and to the end goal of Islam as a religious system? That was actually a question that I asked earlier.
Human happiness and living a good life, a beautiful life, is part of Islam. That's something that's an end. Like if you want to talk about maqasid al-Sharia, the aims of the Sharia, this is happiness and living a fulfilled life in the most complete sense is an aim of the Sharia. But how does that come about? It comes about through these kinds of divine guidance from the creator of human beings, who knows and has the knowledge for what kinds of practices actually are best for society, as opposed to the limited and finite human mind, which can speculate and often be very, very wrong. I'll give you another example about like gender mixing, for example. Look at the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement, where all of these women are saying that we are tired of being sexually harassed. We are tired of being, having to kiss up and do these kinds of sexual flirtatious behavior so that we can move up the ladder. And this is, we have to believe all women, and we have to completely reform the corporate culture. But Jordan Peterson actually made a very good point. And I'm not a fan of Jordan Peterson. I think he has some, he's not the best representative of what I'm trying to argue, but he made an interesting point. He said that men and women working together in a corporate environment is something very new. It's something that we've only seen in human history for the past 50 or 60 years. And is it the case that this is actually something that could work? We don't really know that, because it's only been 50 years of history, and that's nothing in the time span of human existence. And it might be the case, this is what Jordan Peterson said in an interview, it might be the case that women and men can't actually work together in an environment without that collapsing into a dysfunctional situation. Why? Because of human nature. And the way that human beings are with attraction and sexuality and so forth. So Jordan Peterson makes this argument. I think it's a very interesting point that human beings in the 60s, in the sexual revolution, couldn't have anticipated the kind of problems that would arise in a generation or 2 generations time. The human mind is finite and could not conceivably calculate and determine. But
it was also argued
necessary.
It was also argued decades or centuries ago that two people of different races cannot live together. That was actually a very dominant and very notorious thought that we have from history, where it was often argued that it is simply not healthy for Black people and white people to live together in the same place, or for people of different religions to live in the same environment. All of these have been proven wrong. These are simply ideas that people are confronted with, and worries that people have, and where through I'm going to use the word again, utilitarian thinking and utilitarian means, we figure out how to live and how to deal with these problems and eventually learn to function. I mean, it would be a strange example to give the Me Too movement for how men are unable to respect women that work with them and then to harass them, considering that in an Islamic society we would just be left with a society where women have to be subjugated by men and have sex with them whenever the man wants to, even if the woman doesn't want to. So
we can talk about women's rights, but it's going to take too long.
Of course. But I just don't understand. We're giving practical reasons why Islam should be preserved and why it works. I think we will not have a proper answer to the question why Islam is concerned with forcibly and brutally preserving the means through which it claims to bring about human happiness, which I don't think is a fundamental part of Islam's teachings. But why this matters, why this is your method of justification, of justifying Islamic law, and why Allah would care so much, why it would matter for humans to make sure that people follow Islam strictly, and that we enforce Islamic laws upon society strictly. And if people eventually deviate from Islam, unless we strictly force them to stay with Islam, and unless we punish them with very harsh laws, this just shows to me that Islam on its own is not strong enough in its idea and its ideology, and which is why it must be imposed and enforced on people. And I think one supporting evidence of that is that people are increasingly becoming less religious and less Islamic in our time.
I mean, the world that we live in today is based on complete coercion and force. There's an interesting quote from a Yale legal scholar, and he says that every law is an opportunity for violence. Every law that is legislated is an opportunity for violence. Why? Because if someone violates the law, like give the parking ticket example, you get a parking ticket, you don't pay it, then the government can put a lien on your house, foreclose your house, and kick you out. If you refuse to leave your property, the sheriff can come and arrest you. If you refuse arrest, then he is licensed to shoot you and kill you, to use deadly force. And so every law has this threat of deadly force. And Western countries have the most laws of any civilization in history. Like you could, even if you spent your whole life trying to study Western law, you couldn't cover every subfield of the legal system. So this is constant control and imposition and violence. And this is why you can have people who are completely different in their religion who are able to live peacefully with each other, because the state is controlling everything and making sure that violence doesn't erupt. But if you don't have that Leviathan state, that kind of imposition dictating every moment of your life, surveilling every moment of your life as currently exists in the West and in the world as a whole, then what other kinds of ways can you maintain social order? And in those circumstances, having similarity in religious belief is very important for maintaining that.
Well, I would argue that comparing the Western system, for example, to the Islamic system in this regard wouldn't be useful enough, because the question is why Islam needs to enforce its laws through humans upon society in order to preserve Islam, when Islam is supposed to be such a perfect system, which humans seemingly don't really want to strictly follow.
People are irrational, my friend. People are irrational.
I understand, but
people can be irrational, right?
I wouldn't think that. I think
in the West, okay.
No, I think,
for example, lockdown was imposed for COVID. It doesn't matter if you believe that COVID is deadly. It doesn't matter if you believe that this is a highly infectious, deadly disease or not. You have to lock down, and you can't leave your house. You can't step foot in your house. You can't take your kids to the playground. Otherwise, an armed police officer is going to come and threaten you to get back in your house. Okay. Regardless of whether you believe it or not. So why is that the case? Why is a police officer necessary? Why do we have some cities where there are military tanks going down the street to keep people locked down? Why? Aren't people rational? Science is so clear and obvious. Right?
Isn't your entire point? I mean, your entire defense of Islam as a just system would be that it comes down from a divine perspective, and it tells us the truth. It tells us how to perfectly live a life. If we are left without Islam, we are left to systems where humans drive their own laws and make their own laws, drive their own systems. If we are left to liberalism, where the entire idea consists of maximizing human happiness through equality and freedom, we are left to humans making their own laws. Yes, when we look at history, we see that every law outside of Islam, every law together, every culture, every legal system together with Islam has always worked toward more progress. People have been left to their own discretion. People have been left with their own laws, and what we have today is we have the means to get from this place to that place within 2 hours, whereas that was like 15 hours in the past. We have computers, we have phones, we have science, we are healing each other, we are helping each other, people are donating, people are doing great things. So some people may be irrational, we may be doing irrational things for our own ego, but if you look at humanity as a whole, you see that people are essentially always after their own good, and the clear evidence for that is simply undeniable. If you look at how much progress people have made, and how much people value virtue, how much they want to appear virtuous, how much they want to be virtuous, how much they value help and donating and all that. Even if they're not always loyal to that, that's what they aspire to. Even if they're not always even if they don't always have the energy for progress, they aspire to make more progress. People are irrational, of course, but people are also very smart and essentially eventually decide what is best for them. And this is the entire idea of liberalism and of utilitarianism. And I think if you look at history, this is what we are getting at.
Yeah,
but
so progressivism is something that we should very critically examine, and there are many philosophers who have critically examine progressivism, and they will question the idea that technological advancement and creating this consumerist, capitalist, technocratic society is actually leading to human happiness. And many of them will disagree. They think that, and they argue that technology it creates enslavement. Technology creates a kind of subservience and a dependence, a consumerist dependence that destroys the kinds of human bonds that humans were meant to live naturally, organically. When we introduce certain technologies, there's always a human cost to that. Like, let's put aside the question of whether this technological development would have been possible without imperialism and basically sucking up the world's wealth that the West did. Let's put that issue aside. But even technology itself, does it improve the quality of human life? I'm not convinced. I'm a big skeptic of that, but I don't want to belabor the point.
Yeah, I would say that if you look at the consensus, I would severely disagree that the progress that we are making is eventually harmful. I keep confusing these two words during this conversation for some reason, but I would definitely agree that the progress that we are making is eventually good for us. I would say that we are making a lot of progress that is probably not good. I would be a proponent of the idea that we should be making progress carefully, which is also, as said, the core idea of liberalism. We should be gradually looking for what is best and making progress accordingly. Eventually, people will figure out what is best for them. As I view society.
Transhumanism?
Excuse me?
Have you heard of transhumanism?
You mean to acquire a different nature and to change our nature with the means of technology and.
Yeah, exactly.
I have, yeah. I think it carries. I think there are some great ideas to it. Sure.
Yeah. So transhumanism means that you're using technology you can change anything, right? You can, if you could upload the human mind to a computer technologically, and then we just live in a kind of matrix or virtual reality, or perhaps using drugs, we can induce a constant state of euphoria that humans just enjoy. This dopamine drip, essentially, through the use of narcotics or drugs or whatever. So the promise of progress and technology fundamentally is going to annihilate human beings, because at that point you're no longer you're a brain in a vat, or you're just a kind of electronic signature within a network. So this kind of progressivism is going to lead to the destruction of the human race as we know it. And a lot of people are not.
Why does it matter to you?
Because I'm a human being.
But you are working toward just submitting to Allah and going to heaven. What does it matter to you if humans eventually?
Islam is an affirmation of life. Islam is an affirmation of natural human living, whereas your progressivism and technologism is going to lead to the annihilation of the human race and brains in a vat, a matrix type situation. That's your future.
But the thing is, you're presenting this fatalistic perspective of what humans eventually will become. When
many philosophers transcend the entire field.
It doesn't matter to you. You already have a fatalistic belief of the world. You believe that humans will eventually that humanity will eventually be destroyed and resurrected, and then go to heaven or hell forever. So I don't understand why it matters to you what eventually happens to humankind if they go on with technology.
Okay, well, technology, like what is technology? What makes technology good is because it increases pleasure, right? You're a utilitarian. And pleasure is something physical. It's something that can be induced in the brain physiologically. So what if we create this perfect utilitarian utopia where we plug everyone's brain into this kind of dopamine drip, just like a matrix type situation, and you're living there's no more pain, there's no more sadness, there's no more harm because you're just in a vat and you're living this virtual reality. Isn't this a utilitarian utopia? Because
I wouldn't say so.
Pleasure. Why? Pleasure is
no, you know what? I care a lot about transhumanism, and I believe that I always think I would love to live for a few centuries just to see what humans will do with this technology, because I would love to see that humans will one day be able to preserve a brain for forever, as long as they have the means to do that, and that they will assume different bodies, that they will assume a different nature, that they will become much faster in progress, that they will discover different planets and all that stuff. But we could talk about that forever. I love the idea of what transhumanism could do, and I think that it could do a lot of bad things, but it could do a lot of great things. I just don't understand how this would be relevant to Islam in any way, because if it was left to Islam, we would all be just living an Islamic life and never getting to this stage anyway. You could make the first step and stop using technology, for example, if you believe that it would essentially lead to a point that is undesirable to you. No, but you won't do that because you are utilitarian too, just like me, and just like humanity.
No, I'm not a utilitarian. I'm just using that kind of argumentation because that's what you agree with, and I'm showing how like vacuous the idea of pleasure. Like, why should a physical pleasure be considered good? Like, good is a moral term; it's a normative term, whereas pleasure is something physical. So there is a naturalistic fallacy that say that whatever is pleasurable is necessarily good. There's a kind of this is a philosophical issue that maybe you're familiar with, but when it comes to maximizing pleasure, I just gave a scenario because I think there's a lot of human happiness that comes outside of physical pleasure. The happiness of like holding your daughter or your son, the happiness of having your wife committed to you, the happiness of sacrificing yourself for a higher ideal. These are non-physical things, but they are intrinsically human. These are things that are inherently what we things to do for each other in society. And progressivism and this kind of consumerist technologism is taking us away from that life and that existence. And it's because of the logic of utilitarianism, that as long as you have the physical individual pleasure as an individual and you're trying to constantly maximize that pleasure in your brain, the dopamine rush, then you can just introduce all kinds of technology until a point where things are so advanced that you're literally just a brain in a vat.
Of course, but as said, I am always for progress and always for careful progress and progress made in a reasonable way. I would definitely not describe myself as a progressive, for example, which progressive today carries connotations that basically go toward making the kind of progress that a far left in America represents, which I'm totally against. But we're very far off topic. We could talk about philosophy, about the future of humankind forever. I still don't understand how it matters to you, to Islam, to Allah, and all that. But I guess we would have to go into a whole debate, whole discussion on whether the Islamic belief makes sense or not, whether it is philosophically logical, if it is conclusive or not. I would love to have such a debate, but I believe that today is proof that we would have to have a moderated debate with time limits. But yeah, I wanted to go into
I gave you mental structure for the argument that I would make, like, why is Islam true? Like, just these wisdoms for a non-Muslim, like reflecting on these wisdoms.
I don't think we have gone into the logical aspect of. I mean, you can go into why the legal system of Islam makes sense, but we would have to, if we really want to talk about.
Let me explain like my phenomenology or what I experienced, because I came from a liberal background. I came from a liberal secular background, and maybe we can end with this. But these ideas were foreign to me because I hadn't studied it. My parents hadn't introduced these aspects of Islamic law to me. And it was only through learning about them first and foremost, and then reflecting on them, diving deeper into the philosophy of liberalism, diving deeper into the wisdom of Islamic law in all of its detail, without sugarcoating, without apology. And then I was surprised. I was very surprised by the deep wisdom that is found within Islamic law that I was completely ignorant of. And so this gave more credence to the claim that this is from a divine source. This is from a divine source, because the entire world, unfortunately, is following this kind of liberal ideology. And that's why Islam seems so strange and Islamic law seems so foreign, because everyone has been taken in by this common sense of the status quo that is constantly changing in this global Western hegemony. But Islam stands out and is distinct from that. And that in itself, the surprising difference between Islam and this hegemony is itself evidence and proof for a divine source, that this is from revelation. It's something that is beyond a human being to rationalize and construct as a system. So this is like one of the evidences, I think one of the strongest evidence for the truth of Islam, and it's what gives me faith. And I invite all of the viewers, if you're Muslim, strengthen your faith. Be confident about Islam. Do not apologize. Do not sugarcoat. Islam is the truth. For non-Muslims, look into Islam. I invite you to become Muslim. I invite you to accept Islam. Do not stay away from Islam. Come to Islam, and it leads to a beautiful life. It might not make sense at first, but look more closely, think more deeply, and inshallah, Allah will guide you, and the truth will become manifest to you.
Thank you. I would say I would like to quickly summarize what I think about that, what my conclusion is, just because it is so much fun, and because I think it would be. I think your friends would benefit from it very much too. But the thing is, my problem with Muslims and Muslim apologists is that I have probably never encountered a Muslim apologist who is ready to explain Islam and logically explain Islam, who actually believes in Islam and believes in Allah just because the idea of Allah itself, or because the idea of Islam itself it makes so much sense and is completely explainable. My impression of why you came to believe in Islam is that you concluded that Islam's philosophy and Islam's moral and political system is the only system that addresses things correctly in the world, which to you is proof that Islam is real and that Allah is the true God and that Muhammad is his messenger. So your conclusion is actually that the philosophy and the politics and the morals make sense, which is why it's real.
I mean, that's one reason. There's others as well.
Okay, sure. I would say I mean, my journey was that I grew up with as a secular, non-practicing Muslim. The only thing that I knew was that I should believe in Allah, respect Allah, and practice Islam. I was quite respectful. I wasn't as disrespectful as non-practicing Muslims usually are. At some point, I ended up strongly believing in Islam, and strictly following Islam and preaching Islam to others, praying day and night, studying and enhancing my knowledge on it day and night. But I have simply come to certain conclusions, and one of them is definitely, I think, a very strong conclusion, which also would conclude. I apologize to my dear Christian friends and viewers here, which would also conclude why I don't think God exists at all, and that is the idea that if God exists, and if Allah asks me in the Quran itself to think and to use my mind and to use reason, then it would be inconsistent and incoherent with that thought that Allah would eventually send me to a place for eternity where I would burn and torture and be tortured forever, simply because I am an ignorant human. Because the thought is, of course, Allah is supposed to have given me free will after He created me, so that I can find the truth, so that I can choose right and wrong. And if I choose the truth, then I go to heaven. And if I choose the wrong thing, then I will go to hell forever. But the issue with all that is that it was Allah Himself who created me in the very beginning, who made my mind, who built my mind, and who is essentially responsible for how my mind works. If I am ignorant in life, and if I therefore conclude that I cannot believe in Islam, and if nothing convinces me that Islam is true, and I die in that state and go to hell, then that is not entirely my fault. It is the fault of my nature. If I build something in a way that it doesn't work the way I intended to work, then I take responsibility for that, not the tool itself which I created. Moreover, Allah knew long before He created me where I would eventually go. If He did go ahead and create me, knowing that I would use my free will and go to hell, then that means Allah did create me with the foreknowledge that I would simply serve as a suffering and sensible human to be tortured and suffer forever. If that is the definition of a true God, and if that is the definition of the true Allah, then I don't think that really that is good. I don't think that's good from a human moral point of view, and I don't think that's good from the point of view of the Quran itself. And that was one of the main crucial conclusions I came to, which made me decide that I can simply not believe in Islam. I would love to give this to Muslim viewers. You can say, "Oh, that makes no sense" and all that stuff, but I would just like you to look at to think it through a little bit and just to take it apart.
This is the problem of theodicy, philosophical problem. It's a lot of writing on it and philosophical in the Western tradition and in the Islamic tradition. So we can't really get into it and address it, but just like all of these other issues, if you've listened on slavery, on hudud, on apostasy, like all of them have clear answers and logic, and theodicy is also an issue that we can deconstruct and analyze that you described. And I hope that you are a inquisitive person, Ridvan, and the fact that something doesn't make sense to you at a certain point of time, like you've went through this kind of transition. You were a practicing devout Muslim, and then now you're not. You're an atheist, but that could change. I've went through transitions in my life. I was Shia, I became Sunni, I was liberal and non-practicing, I became practicing. So these are things that we can change. We have to seek the truth. And I hope that provide anything to help you understand certain things on a rational and logical basis. I'm always that I don't shy away from conversation. I hope that one day actually you will also find the truth and return back to Islam. And that's my hope for everyone. Islam is merciful in that way, that we care about others, we care about the salvation of others. And the happiness in this life and the next. So,
but I should be killed. Okay. I'm just. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Daniel. I appreciate that you sat with me here for quite a while. I hope this discussion has been fruitful, has been beneficial in some way. I think it did get heated and complicated and controversial at some points, but I think it was necessary. As said, I would always love to exchange ideas in a peaceful way when it comes to these issues, when it comes to theology, when it comes to the logic of believing, and all that. Let's see what the future brings. I thank you very much again for being here, despite terribly disagreeing with many things that you say, but you also do the same with me. So we are kind of at the same spot. I want to thank everybody for joining. Thanks so much for the chats. I haven't really been able to follow because I wanted to focus, and there was so much going on here. Thanks, everybody. I will hopefully see you again. Daniel, do you want to say anything final?
No, you can follow me at muslimskeptic.com. That's my website. I have an institute, Alesna Institute. It's at alesna.org, ALASNA.org, where I teach how to address these issues and how to argue. We go much more in depth in my actual courses on these topics. So if you're a Muslim or non-Muslim interested in these issues and studying at an academic in-depth level, you can take my courses, join the institute at alesna.org, or if you just want free content, I have my Facebook page, my YouTube channel, Twitter, and you can also go to muslimskeptic.com.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you again, everybody. Have a fantastic day, evening, wherever you are. And as always, in the name of both of us, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I know I'm not allowed to do that. Have a great day and stay away from Islam.
Join Islam. Embrace Islam.
Stay away from Islam. I have the last word.
Muhammad Rasulullah.
I doubt that.
Bye-bye.